Spirited Away is a 2001 animated film written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki that's full of anti-capitalist themes often found in Marxist theory, such as class struggle, alienation, worker solidarity, and critiques of consumerism. In the world of Spirited Away, workers are alienated from themselves after giving up their names to Yubaba, the owner of a bathhouse for spirits, and the alternative to laboring is being turned into an animal, like what happens to 10-year-old protagonist Chihiro's parents after a bout of overconsumption. It's full of Marxist allegory, but before we dive deeper into the symbolism of Spirited Away and analyze it through a Marxist lens, we first need to talk about its creator, Hayao Miyazaki, and his relationship to Marxism. Miyazaki got his start in animation at Toei Animation Studio in 1963 after graduating from college with degrees in political science and economics. By the time the 22-year-old Miyazaki was hired on as an in-betweener, Toei already had a fairly strong union that had won multiple labor disputes. Shortly after starting his role, Miyazaki even led demonstrating animators in a union dispute, and in 1964 he became the union's chief secretary. During this time, Miyazaki considered himself to be a Marxist, though later he went on to state, "During the time I was trying to conclude Nausicaa, I did what some might think is a turnabout. I totally forsook Marxism. I had no choice but to forsake it." Miyazaki may not be a Marxist anymore, but we can still analyze Spirited Away through a Marxist lens to better understand Miyazaki's criticisms of our modern consumerist world, as well as gain a deeper understanding of the world Miyazaki wishes to see, one where kindness and love are prioritized above all else. Speaking of love, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Paired. Paired is an app that you can use with your partner to make time for each other every day and to take care of and deepen your relationship by doing daily questions, quizzes, or games. Basically what you do is you download it on both of your phones and you share a code, and then instead of spending your time doom scrolling, you can use the Paired app and get to know each other better no matter what stage your relationship is in. What's really fun is that you can't see your partner's answers at all until you submit your own, and then you can debrief about them together, which can prompt some really interesting, fun, and meaningful conversations that you otherwise wouldn't have thought to have. It's really nice. And you really do learn new things about your partner, even if you think you already know everything there is to know about them. Like, I've been in a relationship with my spouse for 10 years now, and this app actually makes us think about stuff we hadn't really considered before, which I love. We've actually been using this app daily for a little bit now, and we've been really enjoying it. A lot of the time, we're told that we need to communicate more in our relationships, but aren't really given a model or a framework of how to do that, and Paired really helps with that. Because the Paired app is backed by expert advice and research from relationship therapists and experts, it encourages you to practice communicating with your partner daily in a fun and easy way. If you want to try the Paired app, you can click the link in the description box below to get 50% off Paired Premium to deepen your relationship with your partner. Thank you so much to Paired for sponsoring this video. Alrighty, back to the video. Miyazaki claims to have forsook Marxism, even stating that, "I decided that it is wrong, that historical materialism is also wrong, and that I shouldn't see things with it," but what did he mean by that, exactly? Historical materialism is the application of the Marxist dialectical method to analyzing history, which focuses on observing contradictions between social relations. It argues that the main force that determines the character and development of society is the mode of production. For example, feudalism, capitalism, or socialism, and that the driving force of history is class struggle between those who control the means of production, the ruling class, and those who labor, the working class. This class struggle eventually leads to revolutionary change. Under the capitalist mode of production, the two main classes are the bourgeoisie, who own the means of production, and the proletariat, who do not own the means of production and thus have to sell their labor power to the bourgeoisie for a wage. The bourgeoisie exploits the labor of the proletariat to earn profits, which leads to class struggle. In the same interview, Miyazaki explained, "No matter which class one is born into, a stupid person is a stupid person, and a nice one is a nice one. It's not that one is right or wrong, it's just whether they are a nice guy, whether I want to become a friend with them. I stopped seeing things by class. It's a lie that one is right just because they are a laborer. The general public do many stupid things." So I've seen Spirited Away probably well over 100 times at this point, because I used to watch it like nearly daily as a kid, and it's literally one of my favorite movies, but it's clear that Miyazaki didn't actually debunk historical materialism and simply holds a very individualistic viewpoint where he believes that Marxist class analysis is just a shorthand way of determining which individuals are nice and correct or not, rather than a method for understanding the greater systems that do indeed impact the behavior of individuals, but don't necessarily determine if they're nice or not. Like, obviously you can be a reactionary laborer, or you can own a company and treat your employees very well, but either way, Marxism isn't a tool for judging individuals and determining whether someone is nice or not, but rather a lens for analyzing and interpreting the world. Which Miyazaki forsook because he decided that it's more important to just look at individuals on a case-by-case basis. But we are not going to look at individuals on a case-by-case basis. We are going to use Marxist theory to analyze Spirited Away. Although Miyazaki has claimed, I think that this clear change in my way of thinking came from my writing Nausicaa rather than the change of my position in this society. Of course, as the co-founder of a massively successful and popular animation studio, it would make sense for him to stop identifying with an ideology that he seems to view as capable of determining the morality or niceness of a person based on their class. If you're bourgeois, or even petite bourgeois, which Miyazaki is, because he is the owner of a company, and you think that Marxism teaches you that those people are bad, even if it doesn't actually, it makes sense to not identify with it. But despite his rejection of Marxism, Miyazaki has said, I still aspire deep down to a more just society, and I remain influenced by the communist ideal formulated by Marx, even if I have, of course, no affinity with the experiments of real socialism. Which we can see in Spirited Away with its critiques of the destructive nature of capitalism and unchecked consumerism on humans, spirits, and the environment. So let's jump into our Marxist analysis of Spirited Away using the Marxist dialectical method as a framework, while keeping in mind Miyazaki's own perspective on Marxism. 1. Consumerism and Crisis. Spirited Away starts off with 10-year-old Chihiro begrudgingly traveling to her new family home with her parents in their 1996 Audi A4 Quattro, a luxurious imported car signifying their socio-economic status as part of the labor aristocracy that, despite being part of the proletariat exploited by the bourgeoisie under capitalism, receive enough concessions from the ruling class and have enough purchasing power to live in relative luxury with a nice car and a house in the suburbs. Miyazaki has stated before, modern life is so thin and shallow and fake. I look forward to when developers go bankrupt, Japan gets poorer, and wild grasses take over, and we can immediately see his anti-modernity, pro-nature perspective in his portrayal of Chihiro's family. And in the rest of the movie as well. Chihiro's dad speeds through the woods, and Chihiro's mom mentions that some people believe that spirits live in the small shrines in the woods, showing that they do not necessarily respect nature or take the time to appreciate it or even believe in the spirits associated with it. Humans are meant to have a reciprocal relationship with nature, but under capitalism, this relationship becomes purely extractive and one-sided, with nature becoming commodified for the benefit of humans regardless of the long-term impact on both humanity and the planet. After Chihiro's dad halts upon seeing a statue in a decrepit building, Chihiro's family walk through the archway, and Chihiro's dad declares that he knew it. This was just an abandoned amusement park, mentioning that a whole bunch of them were built until the economy collapsed and shut them down. Chihiro's dad is talking about the economic boom that Japan experienced in the 1980s, which was then followed by a recession starting in 1991. This lost decade, as it's known, led to bankruptcies, lowered consumer spending, an insecure job market, and a lack of social mobility. According to Karl Marx, these boom and bust cycles are a central aspect of the capitalist mode of production and are inevitable in a system driven by profit maximization, as capitalism is. Under capitalism, the economy is not planned, and goods are not produced based on the needs of society, but rather based on what companies think will generate the most profit, often resulting in companies producing more goods than consumers need or can afford, leading to a major contradiction. While production expands, the working class's purchasing power remains limited, leading to overproduction relative to demand. Economic growth can only resume after some amount of capital is either destroyed or drastically devalued. Because capitalism is about maximizing profits and there is a tendency for the rate of profit to fall over time, these companies need to find ways to continue earning profits after the devaluation of their products, which can be achieved by cutting workers' wages or, more commonly, raising prices. Inflation. As prices increase, workers can't afford to buy as much, leading to an economic crisis as things become less affordable, leading people to just buy less. Because everything's expensive. With each crisis, small businesses like these abandoned theme parks Chihiro's dad mentions are often closed down or absorbed by larger enterprises, leading to monopolization, and wealth becomes concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer people. As Chihiro's family explores, her parents stumble upon a restaurant with copious amounts of food and start eating. Her dad states it's fine, he's got credit cards and cash. His consumerist mindset allows him to frame this situation as purely economic, where money is the solution, rather than a social or moral matter, allowing him to justify their overconsumption with his ability to pay. Chihiro, skeptical of the food, explores the amusement park, finding a massive bathhouse and a boy named Haku, who warns her to cross the river before sunset. Chihiro tries, but finds that her parents have been turned into pigs, and that the entrance of this abandoned amusement park is flooded. 2. The political economy of Spirited Away. Haku finds Chihiro, helps her not disappear, and walks her across the bridge to the bathhouse, eventually telling her, if you don't get a job, Yubaba will turn you into an animal. Yubaba is the sole owner of this bathhouse for spirits, a massive Meiji-style building. The Meiji era of Japanese history was a time when Western influences, such as capitalism, shaped the ideological and political landscape of Japan. As the sole private owner of an enterprise under this capitalist mode of production, Yubaba is, by definition, part of the bourgeoisie, exploiting the labor of her workers to generate profit for herself. Chihiro must sell her labor power to Yubaba to justify her existence, just as workers must labor under capitalism or be relegated to what Marx and Engels call the relative surplus population or the reserve army of labor. According to Marx, capitalism necessitates the existence of the surplus population, whose existence benefits capital by reducing wages, job security, and labor's ability to challenge capital for fear of joining the surplus. In the spirit world of Spirited Away, if you do not labor, rather than becoming unhoused or unemployed, you simply become a pig like Chihiro's parents. The fact that Chihiro is 10 years old and her working for Yubaba would undoubtedly be considered child labor is never mentioned, alluding to the fact that the mode of production in the spirit world of Spirited Away is a form of unregulated capitalism with limited labor protections, especially for children. Honestly, one of the biggest failures of capitalism is child labor. I feel like even people who like capitalism would agree, right? Chihiro follows Haku's instructions to make it to the boiler room, where she meets Kamaji, who introduces himself to Chihiro as the slave to the boiler that heats the baths, showing that he understands his position in the labor hierarchy. He must work to earn money rather than earning money simply from owning means of production like the bourgeois Yubaba. His 6 arms allow him to do the labor of 3 people, likely without additional benefits or pay, representative of the unpaid overtime that corporate salaried employees often do, especially during these times of mass layoffs when one person is often forced to do the jobs of 3 people. Despite understanding his position as working class in the class hierarchy, Kamaji does not seem to have class solidarity with the soot sprites that he manages. This is partially because they're soot animated via magic, so he thinks of them as expendable, fungible laborers, similar to how the bourgeoisie view their workers under capitalism, although Kamaji is not bourgeois, he's just a manager, but still a worker. As Chihiro watches the soot sprites work, one of the soot sprites gets squished by a piece of coal, which Chihiro then picks up, throwing it in the boiler per Kamaji's request, despite the fact that she's not being paid for her labor. And that's honestly kind of how tech interviews are. The sprites gather around Chihiro in a worker revolt, attempting to offload their labor onto her, showing us that the most powerful tool a worker has is their ability to withhold their labor. Kamaji tells her not to take the soot sprites' jobs because if they don't work, then they'll turn back into soot. Another symbol of workers needing to work under capitalism in order to stay alive. If you do not labor, you will not live. You will literally become inanimate. Lin enters Kamaji's room to give him food and sees Chihiro, shouting that Kamaji will be in big trouble for hiding the human. Kamaji says that Chihiro is his granddaughter and wants a job there, symbolic of the fact that nepotism makes it easier to get ahead in life and to gain employment, particularly under capitalism. Lin says no way until Kamaji offers her a roast newt, bribing her with luxuries that are often unaffordable for workers like her, but easier to acquire for middle management laborers like Kamaji who hold a higher position in the labor hierarchy with closer proximity to the bourgeoisie, despite still being part of the working class. Kamaji tells Chihiro to talk directly to Yubaba to get a job. He himself does not have the power to hire employees. Once Chihiro makes it to the top floor with help from Lin and the radish spirit, Yubaba uses her magic to drag Chihiro over to where she's sitting, showing us all the opulent and luxurious hallways in Yubaba's massive penthouse and the wealth that Yubaba has acquired, all thanks to the laborers downstairs. Chihiro asks for a job, and Yubaba magically zips her lips shut and insults her, telling Chihiro that her parents are pigs now and threatening to turn her into a piglet or a lump of coal. Though it is through magic that Yubaba closes Chihiro's mouth, this is very much reminiscent of how the bourgeoisie have near total control over the proletariat, often enough to silence them or prevent them from speaking up against their own mistreatment. Yubaba also tries to get Chihiro to divulge who helped her get there, but Chihiro has solidarity with her fellow workers and would never snitch on them. As Chihiro continues to ask for a job, Yubaba starts shouting, jumps at Chihiro, and pokes and prods at her, showing that as the bourgeoisie, she has all the power in this relationship and there is no way to hold her accountable for mistreatment of workers. As Yubaba's baby starts crying, Chihiro continues asking for a job. Yubaba begrudgingly agrees, feeling regret about taking an oath to give a job to anyone who asks. Yubaba wants to engage in worker discrimination and is upset that an external force, in this case the oath, prevents that. After Chihiro signs the contract, Yubaba magically lifts part of Chihiro's name off the paper, stating that it belongs to her now and bestowing Chihiro with a new name, Sen. This represents how, along with Chihiro's new employment role, comes alienation and a loss of identity outside of that of a worker. According to Karl Marx, laboring under capitalism alienates us from the process of our labor over which we have no control, the fruits of our labor which the capitalist reaps the rewards of in the form of profit, our fellow laborers, and our own human essence. Yubaba calls in Haku and tells him to get Sen a job. Haku acts like he doesn't even know Chihiro, now Sen, at all, even telling the other workers that if she's bad, they can basically just eat her, and I guess it's not cannibalism because they're not humans. As Sen receives her new uniform after being assigned to work as Lin's assistant, Lin tells her that Haku is Yubaba's henchman and to not trust anything he says, revealing to us that Haku is not a worker like Sen and Lin, but occupies a petite bourgeois class position as Yubaba's apprentice. Despite this higher position in the class hierarchy, Haku is still under Yubaba's dominion, evidenced by the fact that shortly after this interaction, Haku takes Sen to see her parents, and we learn that Yubaba has also stolen his name like the rest of the laborers. Thus, even though Haku holds more authority than the other workers, he is still alienated from his true self and also subject to capitalist exploitation. Like middle management under capitalism, Haku occupies a precarious position. He has more power and responsibility than other workers, but is still not truly autonomous or free. We can also see that Yubaba doesn't control her workers through sheer violence, but by alienating them from themselves and taking away any identity they have outside of the labor they perform for her. 3. Labor and class struggle. On Sen's first day of work, she and Lin are instructed to clean the big tub per Yubaba's orders. Lin exclaims that this is frog work, demonstrating that even among the workers there is still a hierarchy. The frogs normally do the more difficult jobs like cleaning this giant filthy bathtub, but because Yubaba has full control over how this bathhouse is run, Sen and Lin are in no position to decline these orders, thus being forced into performing labor outside of their job descriptions despite its potential hazards. Lin prompts Sen to ask the foreman for an herbal soak token, and when she does, he refuses. The foreman represents the reactionary elements of the working class. Rather than having class solidarity, he discriminates against Sen simply because he doesn't approve of her humanness or her status as an outsider and newcomer. He is alienated from his fellow worker, who he refuses to see as a fellow worker due to their differing identities. Luckily, No-Face gives Sen a token, and then Lin instructs Sen on how to fill the tub, and Sen yet again falls on the job, showing us the potentially dangerous nature of this role. Though luckily, Sen has plot armor and remains unharmed. Lin says she's gonna go get them breakfast, showing us that the workers have to start their workdays before they are even provided with a meal. The bathhouse is essentially like a company town where laborers both live and work. The workers are exploited by Yubaba so she can generate profit from their surplus value, and in return, they are provided with a means to survive, a roof over their head, and food, but only when Yubaba permits it. Additionally, while Yubaba has this enormous and opulent floor all to herself, her workers must live and sleep in crowded conditions with little to no privacy. Again, showing this disparity between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. It's clear that Yubaba represents the bourgeoisie and her workers represent the proletariat, but what about the customers of the bathhouse? The spirits. Though their relationship to the means of production is never explicitly stated, we know that they possess the wealth to pay for these luxurious services offered at the bathhouse, and therefore must be either petit bourgeois, equivalent to small business owners, or part of the labor aristocracy like Chihiro's parents. These spirits come to the bathhouse to wash away their burdens, such as pollution, symbolic of how the labor aristocracy and the petit bourgeois are able to consume luxuries and receive therapeutic care without challenging the exploitation underlying the capitalist system. A stink spirit arrives to the bathhouse, and Yubaba gives Sen the task of cleaning him, threatening to turn Sen into a piece of coal if she doesn't perform well, once again showing Yubaba's absolute power over her workers as the bourgeoisie. Yubaba does not labor herself, and yet as the bourgeoisie, she's in a position that allows her to give her newest worker the toughest client and laugh at her as she struggles to do her new job. Sen is, both figuratively and literally, in a toxic work environment. After Sen falls into the spirit's sludge while filling the tub, the spirit picks her up and shows her that there's something stuck in his side. Yubaba creates a rope via magic that Sen ties to the thorn in the spirit's side and leads her workers in pulling a mess of garbage out of the spirit. Seeing Yubaba among all her workers makes us acutely aware of the contrast between their appearances. While the workers wear simple traditional Japanese attire, Yubaba adorns herself with luxurious Western-style dress and jewelry. Though she and her workers have differing class interests, in this scene they still all work together for the benefit of the bathhouse, eventually ripping a bunch of pollutants and garbage out of what is actually a river spirit. This river spirit is symbolic of the environmental degradation caused by overconsumption and industrial waste. Problems often created by capitalist practices. His transformation can be interpreted as a critique of how environmental damage is superficially dealt with in capitalist societies without addressing the root cause, the economic system itself. The spirit gives Sen a dumpling as a gift, reciprocating the care that she has shown him. As the water level lowers, the gold left by the spirit is revealed and the workers jump to try to collect it. Chichiyaku, a frog who is higher up in the hierarchy of the bathhouse and is thus disconnected from the class interests of his fellow workers, instead upholding Yubaba's class interests and showing his position as a class traitor, yells for them to stop. It's company property! You are not benefiting from all this surplus value, no. After the river spirit flies out the door, Yubaba praises Sen for making them lots of money. Sen has proven her ability to produce shareholder value for Yubaba, effectively making Yubaba change her opinion of her. Sake's on the house tonight, Yubaba says, and then tells everyone to hand over the gold because any money earned in the bathhouse belongs to Yubaba. We see that even if the workers make a massive profit, as they did just now, the surplus value goes straight to Yubaba rather than to the workers themselves, as is typical under capitalism. Afterwards, Sen and Lin discuss their day together. As a train passes by, Lin mentions that someday she'll get on the train and leave the bathhouse for good. But as an alienated worker whose life revolves solely around work, she has no real plan on how or when that'll be. As with the rest of the bathhouse workers, Lin has no aim to challenge the power structure of the workplace. All she can hope for is to escape capitalism. 4. Commodification and alienation. No-face represents alienation, unchecked consumption, and the commodification of everything, including Sen's attention. He is initially passive, but upon learning that he can exchange bath tokens for Sen's attention and trade gold for commodities, he becomes a monster who consumes everything in sight. His greed mirrors the capitalist drive for endless accumulation, but despite his mindless consumption, he still feels empty and unfulfilled, especially when his endless wealth is not enough to buy Sen's attention, which he treats as a commodity. When Sen rejects No-Face's gold so she can leave to go take care of Haku, No-Face, upset by the fact that money cannot buy Sen's attention, becomes destructive and starts eating workers to attempt to consume his way towards emotional regulation. No-Face is alienated from himself and others, reduced to a consumer and driven to overconsume to fill the void created by this alienation. While Yubaba sleeps, the workers also try to get as much gold from No-Face as possible, knowing that if Yubaba claims the gold, the workers won't see any of it and their surplus value will be extracted to profit Yubaba, so she can keep adding to her penthouse. Sen eventually makes her way to Yubaba's penthouse with the help of one of the paper shikigami that attacked Haku, which then transforms into Zeniba, Yubaba's sister. Zeniba explains that Haku stole her magic golden seal and will perish unless it's returned. Haku strikes the shikigami and Zeniba disappears. Haku and Sen, along with Bo and the bird, now transformed by Zeniba's magic, fall to the boiler room where Sen gives Haku half of the river spirit's dumpling, causing him to vomit up the golden seal and a black slug that Sen crushes with her foot. Also, I just have to say I love Chihiro's expressive hair. I would love to have expressive hair, that sounds fun. Sen resolves to return the seal to Zeniba and apologize on behalf of Haku, and Kamaji gives her the train tickets he's been saving for 40 years to do so. Before heading to Swamp Bottom to meet with Zeniba, Sen confronts No-Face, who asks her what she wants. Sen has no consumerist aspirations, simply wanting to leave as she's got somewhere to go. No-Face, who now believes he can buy anything he wants, attempts to buy Sen's attention. Yet again. Sen feeds him the other half of the dumpling and he chases her throughout the bathhouse, vomiting at random intervals before eventually emptying his stomach, purging his consumerist aspirations. Sen gets to the train station with Lin's help, and she, Bo, the bird, and No Face all head off towards Swamp Bottom. Yubaba is furious about Sen letting in No Face and leaving, but 3 workers defend Sen, informing Yubaba that she actually saved them from No Face. That's some worker solidarity right there. Haku shows up and tells Yubaba that she hasn't noticed that something precious to her has been replaced. Yubaba breaks the spells in the room, the fake baby turns back into 3 heads, and the gold left behind by No Face turns to dust. No Face has committed fraud! Yubaba is so enraged by this fact and the fact that her baby is missing that she starts breathing fire right in Haku's face and wrapping him with her hair, again displaying her complete power over her workers. Haku says Yubaba can have her baby back as long as she tears up Sen's contract and gives her her mother and father back. Yubaba says yes, as long as she can give Sen one final test. Sen and company meet Zeniba and Sen apologizes on behalf of Haku. Zeniba informs them that the slug Haku puked up was actually Yubaba's way of controlling Haku. Despite his higher class position, he was still subservient to Yubaba via this magical spell. We also learn that the protective spell on Zeniba's seal could only be broken with true love, acknowledging the love between Haku and Sen, for the second time. Zeniba complains about Yubaba. They may be twins, but they're polar opposites, probably because Yubaba is a capitalist and Zeniba is not. This dynamic between Yubaba and Zeniba leads me to believe that twin studies suggest that the capitalist twin will always be tackier and just generally worse than the non-capitalist twin. Zeniba gives Sen a magic hairband made with the threads woven together by her friends for protection, symbolizing the power of friendship and solidarity. Haku arrives, Zeniba forgives him, and Sen reveals her real name, Chihiro, to Zeniba. While Haku is flying Sen, Bo, and the bird back to the bathhouse, Chihiro remembers falling into the Kohaku River and the water carrying her to shore. Chihiro correctly guesses that Haku's real identity is the spirit of the Kohaku River, which Chihiro says was filled in and is all apartments now, which is why Haku couldn't find his way home. Yet another critique of how capitalism destroys nature for profit. Also, I cry every time I watch this scene. It's so cute. I love love. Don't you? You better. After arriving at the bathhouse, Yubaba tests whether Chihiro can identify her parents in a group of pigs. Chihiro correctly answers that it's none of them. Chihiro's contract disappears, she thanks Yubaba and everyone else, and Haku takes her to the edge of the formerly flooded river, telling her that her parents woke up on the other side. Haku says he's going to quit being Yubaba's apprentice and promises to Chihiro that they'll see each other again. Chihiro, still wearing the magical hairband, crosses the riverbed and meets up with her parents. They emerge from the tunnel and their car is covered in branches and leaves, probably because they were in the spirit world for a while. We see that the statue, which formerly had 2 faces, and the exterior of the tunnel, which was once pink, is now stone, and Chihiro's family leaves for their new home. 5. Conclusion. Taken as a whole, what does Spirited Away teach us about the struggle between capital and labor, capital's destructive effects on nature, and the type of world that we should aspire to? Miyazaki, as a former Marxist, clearly understands the antagonistic relationship between capital and labor, and highlights this class hierarchy and the differing interests of the proletariat and the bourgeoisie via the relationships between the workers and Yubaba. Yubaba has complete power over her workers. She alienates them from themselves, strips them of their identities outside of work, extracts their surplus value, pokes and prods at them, threatens to turn them into coal, threatens to slaughter their parents, and breathes fire directly into their faces with no repercussions. And yet, Miyazaki himself has said that Yubaba is putting all her efforts to protect the bathhouse. She is not a villain. Despite all her best intentions, due to her position as the owner of the bathhouse, Yubaba still exerts dominance over all her workers and is incapable of being held accountable after crossing a boundary due to the nature of the capitalist system. And I would say that having your boss breathe fire in your face or threaten to kill your parents is probably a boundary you wouldn't want to cross. Yubaba may not be a villain, but the nature of her bourgeois position and her antagonistic treatment of her workers in a system where that's considered standard still makes us perceive her as a villain, regardless of what Miyazaki says. It almost seems like being in his position has made him forget how terrible it is to deal with a boss like that you literally can't hold accountable and have to see daily. Yeah, bosses in real life don't breathe fire in your face, but if they could, they probably would, and nothing would stop them. Furthermore, given that we know that Miyazaki has stated that what matters is not one's position in the class hierarchy, but rather whether they are a nice person or not, Haku's petite bourgeois position, combined with his kindness towards Chihiro, is likely meant to get us, the audience, to consider the fact that his class position is not indicative of who he is as a person. He can be Yubaba's petite bourgeois henchman and still be a good and helpful and kind person, or a river spirit. Additionally, none of the workers attempt to challenge the system. They don't like it, but the only goal workers like Lin, Chihiro, and Haku have is escaping the system and escaping the bathhouse, and no longer working at Yubaba's bathhouse, rather than smashing the existing system and building a new one. Through the characters of the Stink Spirit, who is actually a river spirit dealing with pollution, and Haku, whose river was paved over with apartments, Spirited Away also critiques the environmental destruction caused by capitalist development, urging us to care for nature rather than prioritizing material goods. Miyazaki also demonstrates his hatred of consumerism through Chihiro's parents and through No-Face, while still remaining sympathetic to them as alienated beings who consume simply as a means to feel less alienated. Although Chihiro experiences capitalist oppression as part of the working class, her laboring under capitalism in Yubaba's bathhouse is viewed as a mechanism for her character development rather than a purely oppressive force. At the beginning of the film, Chihiro is portrayed as easily frightened and unsure of herself, but through laboring, she grows as a person, becoming more self-assured and confident. According to Spirited Away, though capitalism leads to environmental destruction, alienation, and a culture of overconsumption, laboring under capitalism can also be a means of growing as a person. But is it really the laboring that makes her better off, or is it the connections that she makes along the way? I mean, really, it just shows us the power of worker solidarity in allowing us to survive capitalism. Chihiro is changed for the better by the friends she makes along the way and the love she has for Haku, more so than just through sheer labor. It is the support of those around her that helps her make it through, which showcases the importance of having solidarity with your fellow workers. In the end, it is Chihiro and Haku's love for each other, the bond between humanity and the spirits of nature, that saves them from having to continue laboring under Yubaba. There is no proletariat revolution that deposes Yubaba and installs a workers' democracy, and given Miyazaki's individualistic viewpoint, this makes sense. Spirited Away does not aim to teach us that we can go out there and change the system. Instead, it teaches us that laboring can help change individuals for the better, but only if you have solidarity with your fellow workers. It is only through loving each other, knowing oneself, rejecting consumerism, and connecting with nature that we can truly escape our oppression. It's not a bad message. These are objectively great things. We should absolutely do those things. Go make friends and touch grass, it's good for you. But as we see in Spirited Away, and in reality, it is the larger capitalist system that glorifies consumerism, alienates us from ourselves and one another, creates class struggle, and treats nature as a resource to be extracted that makes doing so very difficult. For Yubaba, for Chihiro's parents, for No-Face, for the spirits, and for the bathhouse workers whose lives revolve solely around work and who are mesmerized by No-Face's endless supply of gold. Haku and Chihiro were lucky to escape, but what about everyone else? Maybe after Chihiro comes back to the human world, Yubaba's workers do revolt and install a workers' democracy, but given that Miyazaki has forsook Marxism, I'm guessing their duties as alienated laborers, working under a bourgeois witch, must continue. Clearly, Miyazaki doesn't want to inspire a proletarian revolution. He just wants a world full of kindness, love, and connection with each other and with nature, rather than this consumerist, exploitative, destructive capitalist mess. Which makes sense, especially given his thoughts on Marxism. Even though Spirited Away is not a revolutionary movie, and I don't particularly want it to be because that would also get into some weird, like, almost colonial tropes where the outsider that knows nothing about this society goes into the society and then rescues them. I think that it's still a lovely message and a beautiful movie. Like, it's just so cute. I love it so much. However, given that the character of society is determined by the mode of production, which includes the means and relations of production, as established earlier, it is only through changing the relations of production from private to collective ownership of the means of production that we can end capitalist alienation, exploitation, and environmental destruction and truly change the character of society for the better. But as Spirited Away reminds us, while we work towards that, we must love each other, know ourselves, reject consumerism, and strengthen our connection to nature. Thanks for watching, and thank you so much to Paired for sponsoring this video. If you want to try out the Paired app with your partner, click my link below to get 50% off Paired Premium so you can maintain and deepen your connection with your partner. This video was also made possible by my amazing patrons on Patreon. If you like my videos and want me to continue making them, consider joining for ad-free uncensored videos, occasional behind-the-scenes content, and patrons-only videos that you can help pick. You can also send me a one-time tip on Ko-fi or PayPal. If you've gotten this far, comment your favorite emoji of a food that you would gorge on if you were suddenly No-Face trapped in Yubaba's bathhouse and seeking to soothe yourself by consuming. Or just let me know your thoughts about Spirited Away and its class character. Is it individualistic bourgeois propaganda? Is it a proletarian masterpiece? Does engaging in child labor actually build character? What do you think? I don't think child labor builds character, but I still love this movie. Okay, bye!